Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. Welcome to r/MaliciousCompliance. Now, I don't know why, but for some reason, I haven't been getting many stories from here lately. I'm sure they've been around, I just haven't seen them. But don't worry, I went on the sub, found some good ones, and I'm now back with some of the best ones that I could find. So, let's not waste another second and get straight into this first one by user/horrorflickguy. I'm a pasty white Caucasian guy. I pretty much look like a ginger, only I'm not a redhead. This is relevant to the story. For almost 8 years, I worked at a popular US chain restaurant, which specializes in breakfast food that may or may not heavily feature various flavors of pancakes. Over time, several managers came and went, but the one who stuck around was the ladder-climbing, brown-nosing general manager, whom we'll call Hope. A narcissistic, verbally abusive control freak, mummy dearest knockoff. Hope had the most grandiose opinion of herself. She had a way of making please and thank you sound like screw you. I did my best to get along with her, although when dealing with someone who thrives on conflict, the best often isn't enough. She made it clear it was her way or the highway. Her oft-spouted catchphrase was, "If you don't like the way I run my store, quit." Hope's countless trademark annoying traits included breathing, coming to work wasted, and talking smack about everyone, from guests to staff alike. She often delivered orders, without allowing any responses, then concluded those interactions with, okay, as if that couldn't get any more obnoxious. Her forced sincerity was almost always accompanied by an annoying Crypt Keeper cackle. Then she'd roll her brown eyes, toss her mouse brown hair over her shoulder, and walk away. Funny story, one Christmas, I was unlucky enough to draw Hope's name from the Secret Santa gift exchange. I seriously considered buying her a batch of wire hangers with a card simply saying, "No wire hangers, ever." I decided against it for the simple reason that it was no secret that I did not like her. It would have been totally obvious who bought her the gag gift. I was one of those highly valued employees. But the way I was treated completely bellied the compliments and accolades I received. That is, my schedule was flipped without my consent, day off requests were denied, while other employees, mostly older married women and single mothers of small children, as well as Hope's drinking buddies, got preferential treatment. Always taking the side of the guest when they were angling for a free meal and etc. Perhaps the worst was the bullying and pettiness among certain employees. It was like high school. It got to the point that I flat out refused to exchange numbers with or add any co-workers on social media. It was a rule that I stood by for a very long time. Don't mix business with personal. I've somewhat relaxed that regulation, but for the most part, it's still in place. Once while in the dining room, another employee poked me in the face with a tampon, right in front of guests, as well as Hope and Sunny, the drunken assistant manager. I filed an official complaint, and nothing came of it. This is one such occasion where they couldn't claim ignorance. My complaint made it real, and they had to address it. Address it they did. They saw me as a whistleblower. Neither Hope nor Sunny could have cared less about staff morale. It was typical of both those embittered hags to accept hearsay as fact. They really did their diligence in getting both sides before plotting a course of action. Oh, and plot they did. Unfortunately, the following shows they responded to my complaint of workplace bullying with malicious intent. It was at this point I began receiving customer complaints. Most of the time, Hope and Sunny would take the word of the so-called customer or server passing on the complaint without offering up any proof a discrepancy had even occurred. I later came to learn the complaints were completely fabricated. It was really a co-worker just trying to stir the pot. The whole story came to its climax when a cokehead, now former employee, circulated a rumor that I refused to wait on an elderly African-American military veteran because I was a racist. Being a veteran myself, I respect all veterans. I found it alarmingly laughable at best because 1. I'm a very gay man. And 2. Most of my boyfriends haven't been white. Hell, everyone, including Hope and Sunny, met my Brazilian ex-boyfriend, who looked black, when he had previously popped in for Sunday brunch. So you can understand why this accusation was out of character and completely out of the blue. It reeked of sabotage. It was way too outlandish to be anything else. So the write-up came. I was absolutely furious, as my suspicions that I'd been set up were confirmed. Both Hope and Sunny would not let me get a word in. I finally got their attention by stating in a raised voice that I had a right to have my say. Surprised at my assertiveness, both went slit-eyed and rather smugly said, "Go on." I pointed out to them that all of my guests love me. Several of my regulars are Hispanic or African American, and in nearly 8 years of employment, not once had I been accused of being prejudiced or bigoted. I also pointed out that one of my regulars, a married female African American doctor, if my hands were free, would run up to me, give me a big hug, kiss me on the cheek, and hold me so tight I felt like I was being suffocated. Hope and Sunny were having none of it. I also pointed out that the drama-starting liar who filed the complaint against me had been fired because she was caught by Hope snorting a certain powder in the ladies' room. Given her predisposition to lie, the validity of her accusation should be questioned and the write-up destroyed. Based off their surprised expressions, it was clear I had exposed their complicitness in creating a hostile work environment. But they refused to take the bait. Completely done with it all, I flat out bellowed, "I am not, nor have I ever been a racist." I'm pretty sure the entire store heard me. Then I went for the zinger that lingers. "You have no idea how many black men have been in my bed." You could have heard a pin drop. Diamanda, the Creole prep cook, was walking by the open office door when I let out that line, and she nearly doubled over with laughter. There were 2 training managers facing away from us while they were on the computer doing online courses. They almost collapsed onto the keyboard, then turned around looking at me with shocked expressions on their faces. Sunny's face went beet red. Hope's face turned white and her eyes widened. "You know what, Hope? Remember how you said if I didn't like the way you ran things, I should quit? Goodbye." I didn't give them a chance to respond. My shift was about to start in less than 7 minutes. I took off my key fob, laid it on the safe, emptied my apron, put everything in a takeout bag, did an about face, and walked out echoing, "Have fun trying to cover my shifts." It was exhilarating and liberating all at the same time. It was like the end of Private Benjamin when Goldie Hawn walked out of her wedding and threw away her veil. Except I've never worn a dress. Just kidding, yes I have. Aside from returning 2 weeks later to get my final paycheck, I haven't set foot in there. I have no reason to go back. I have a new job at a wonderful company with great bosses that value me as an employee. And as a person. I actually look forward to going to work now. I never thought that was possible. Double plus, they don't expect me to be an emotionless robot. The old middle manager. The ones that think that they are the best. They are... Okay, I can't use that expression because YouTube doesn't like it, but you know what I mean. When in reality, they're actually the worst possible people to be managers, and they just make life hell for all their employees. I'm not sure if they get some sense of pleasure from it. I mean, they must if they keep doing it, or they genuinely think they're doing a good job. But most of the time, they're awful. So let's not waste any more time on this manager and move on to the next post by user/antipatico6. This happened years ago at what would turn out to be my last year in a Catholic school, for reasons that will become obvious. I don't have anything against people of faith, but it was not my thing, very early on. I was 12 years old and in 7th grade. I was becoming disenchanted with my Catholic upbringing. I had so many questions, and it might have saved my faith to have them answered reasonably. The adults didn't want to reason with a curious 12-year-old. They wanted to see a nice Catholic girl, who didn't feel compelled to make so much distasteful noise. And that's a funny thing to mention. Maybe a lot more people would retain the faith they were sort of brought up with if they were given proper answers as young people and not just told to blindly obey. I find that kids, whenever they're told to just blindly do something, they tend to want to do the opposite. So, food for thought, let's move on. Ex-Ed was still a part of any Catholic curriculum. And, as it turned out, my religion teacher, Mrs. M, was also my ex-ed teacher. When she opened up our first ex-ed class with, "Now, I'm just embarrassed to be here as you are," I didn't see it as an expression of empathy. I saw it as a grown woman, humiliated to be teaching basic biology. It made me sad. Junior high ex-ed wasn't just biology though. It was an effort to shape our view of the world. Mrs. M taught us sexual health as per Catholic doctrine, and also peppered in some of her own weird personal viewpoints, shaped by her own history, I guess. We had this box at the front of the class where we would discreetly write down and drop off the questions we were too nervous to ask out loud. Someone asked what morphgasms feel like for women. We knew men ejaculate, but what do women do? Mrs. M did not explain. Perhaps because she hadn't had any one day in her life. She said the woman's orgasm is not a necessary part of X. It's not necessary for procreation, and X is for the purposes of procreation. That sounded very dodgy to me. I brought her statement home to my mother, who had always been very open with me about these things. I asked her if women really weren't supposed to enjoy X all that much. She was horrified. She told me lots of men like to make women feel good, and X should feel good for everyone. Then she said something that would be lastingly valuable. Ask questions in that class. Teachers are supposed to answer your questions. And if they can't, maybe they shouldn't be teachers. The next class, Mrs. M taught us that homosexuality was a sin. This was too much for me. I had a yay uncle who had been a huge fixture in my life. I felt attractions to girls in my class, and I refused to believe God would think who you love is worthy of hellfire. She went on to say gay marriage was both impossible and wrong. I raised my hand and asked her plaintively, "Why is gay marriage wrong?" Her answer was, "Because they cannot procreate, and procreation is the purpose of marriage." I sat silently. I didn't demonstrate agreement nor dissent. I went home and thought about that for a while. I needed to come back to ex-ed class with an inquiry that was going to properly mess with Mrs. M. It didn't seem like an easy task, but I came up with something I thought was worth trying out. The next ex-ed class rolled around, and Mrs. M taught whatever stuffy, deplorable lesson she had in her plan. Then she opened up the class to questions. I raised my hand, she called on me, and I said, "If a woman is infertile, but she really loves the man she's with and wants to share the sacrament of marriage with him, does the church approve of this type of marriage?" It was a no-brainer for her, of course. I followed up with, "But she can't have children, and marriage is for procreation. Why can she get married, but two men or two women who can't procreate can't?" Anyone who is seasoned in Christian apologetics can explain this one pretty easily. But I had hid Mrs. M somewhere deeply personal, in front of 30 other children. Mrs. M was a married woman of around 50 or so, with no children of her own. Very unusual for a Catholic woman who doesn't believe in birth control. Mrs. M was infertile, and to her, I was questioning the sanctity of her marriage, and its validity in the eyes of the God she dedicated her life to. It was a sucker punch, and she couldn't collect herself to punch back. She instead flew into a rage. Her face became a deep shade of red, and she said, "This is not a debate class," and sent me to the office. For context, I didn't know Mrs. M was infertile. It's something my mother told me post-office battle. An apology letter was determined to be insufficient by Mrs. M. My mum came to collect me, and a battle ensued. Mrs. M wanted blood by way of suspension, and my mother was having none of it. Curious kids don't get suspended for questioning what they're taught. The only thing that worked in my favour was my history of being a nerdy, non-disruptive child with good grades. A compromise was struck. I wouldn't get suspended, but I could not participate in Ex-Ed class, nor religion class. My grade in those classes would be determined solely by the written portions. These written portions were completed at a desk positioned outside the classroom, which Mrs. M smugly carried out for me every class. I didn't mind working outside the classroom because, to me, it was a good example of the ease in which an adult can collapse under a child's questioning. I decided that religion and Ex-Ed would be my specialty classes. I would master the curriculum, I would get the best grades I could, and Mrs. M would have to watch it happen. I worked very hard, harder than I had in any other classes. I studied at length and did additional research online. I finished out the semester with about 95% in Ex-Ed and 98% in religion. The final exams for both classes were entirely multiple choice. I was permitted into the classroom to be supervised for the exams, and there was no room for her biases to creep into her grading. She passed me the Scantron sheet back from my religion exam. 100%. I thanked her with a saccharine smile. She fixed me with a grim expression before moving on to the next classmate. A few days later, it was the Scantron sheet for the Ex-Ed exam. 100%. I said, "Thank you for all you've taught me," as I smiled up at her. She said something under her breath and moved on. Mrs. M hated me with a distinctly unchristlike passion, and she found other ways to express it in the following semester. It warms my heart a little to think of her having to grade all my schoolwork, one correct answer after the other. The relentlessly curious, heretic nerd girl was a pain in her side that wouldn't go away. Worst of all, she demonstrated that she understood what you were teaching. She just didn't believe it. Wow, this one was awesome. And when I started talking funny in the middle, don't worry, I wasn't going crazy. I was just trying to censor the words for the YouTube algorithm and decided what if I just jumble the letters a bit, add some bits in, take some bits out. Tell me in the comments down below if it worked, if you understood what was going on, or if you felt it was just way too weird. I'm happy to do it, I'm happy to think of other ways, so just tell me what you think down below. Ooh, and I'll throw this one in to lighten the mood a little. Here's a nice little funny one by user/Jasby54. Kids are awesome at malicious compliance, but it is a two-way street. My kids can be picky eaters at times. My wife made some damn good chicken soup, but the kids were complaining that there were veggies in their chicken soup. They hate veggies. Veggies make them sick, and they wanted my wife to pick them out of the soup. We tried to tell them that good chicken soup needs veggies to taste good, but they were being stubborn. I'm sure other parents can understand. I told the kids, if you really hate the taste of veggies, I'll make soup tomorrow, and you guys can make sure I only put stuff you like in it. They liked that idea at the time. The next day, I got the pot filled with water, all the typical soup ingredients out, and gathered the kids. I asked for their approval on every item. Chicken, yes. Salt, yes. Black pepper, no. Gross, too spicy. Celery, no. I can't even stand the smell. Onions, no. It went on with that, with them rejecting parsley, bay leaves, and other veggies. The total contents of the pot ended up being chicken, water, salt, and noodles. After the soup was done cooking, I served it up and they excitedly started to eat. A few funny faces later, and one of them said, "It tastes weird. This isn't very good." I said, "But I only put in everything you guys approved. I think from now on I should make the soup, right?" They looked at each other and said, "Can we have Mum's soup instead?" Since that day, they haven't complained about finding veggies mixed in the food. Sure, they almost always eat around a carrot or green pea, but they understand that it adds flavour. I can't tell, OP, if this is evil or genius, but most likely a bit of both. If I ever get the opportunity to try this out, I definitely will. That is just about the smartest thing I've ever seen. Instead of just yelling at them and telling them to have to eat their veggies, you gave them a taste, literally, of what the other option was. Honestly, that is probably the best malicious compliance story I've heard in a while. And guys, I think I will have to leave this video here. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, make sure to subscribe to the channel for Reddit videos 3 times every single week. But with that said, that is it from me. I hope you all enjoyed, and all I want to do is see you all here next time. See you later, guys.